everyone. Thank you. Alison is recording the call. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on the call. It's Anna Marie here, and Alison is with me. She will be managing the chat box today. Thank you so much. I think what we have done on the call, we have changed the settings so that you can't unmute yourself, just to control the amount of noise in the background. So Alison, if that setting doesn't work, maybe if you can just mute people. There's a lot of people who said that they want to come, and we know if the call gets big and then there's background noise, it can get quite distracting. So it's wonderful to see you all on the call. Thank you so much for being here. This is a free introduction to Sensory Intelligence, and particularly for those of you who work in the coaching, HR, wellness practitioner or therapy space and want to understand yourself first, and obviously secondly, if you want to know how to improve your own toolbox or expand your own toolbox, then this is a place for you to be. Guys, we're going to be very strict with time. We're going to end exactly 5 p.m. our time, so we'll definitely keep track on the clock. And then just to start off with, please can you put in the chat box Thank you, Mike, for telling me. Did you guys hear that intro or not? You have. Wonderful, wonderful. I don't know how I got to unmute myself. Okay, guys, welcome. Lovely to have you all on the call. We're lovely that you are here. Welcome. This is a free introduction for those of you who are in the coaching, HR, or therapy space, want to learn more about yourself and how to expand your own toolbox. We're going to talk about the work that we do at Sensory Intelligence, and we've changed the setting so that you can't unmute yourself. A bit of an apology for that. We love the sessions to be very engaging, but if it's a big group, it can actually lead to a lot of background noise. And in the spirit of Sensory Intelligence, the last thing that we want to do is overload your ears on this particular call. So if we go through the presentation, please pop all of your questions in a chat box. Alison will be managing the chat box for us, and there will be plenty of time for questions towards the end. And then, Alison, you are admitting people as they come in through the chat box. Okay, brilliant. Guys, please pop in the chat box where you are from, just what parts of the world you are in. It would be wonderful to see where everyone is. Oh, thank you, Tash. You did say right at the beginning. Oh, a lot of you said you can't hear me. I didn't check the chat box. Okay, wonderful. We're England, Louisville, Namibia. Namibia is my birth country, so always great to see people from Namibia. Romania, Rome, Italy. Tash is in the Midlands in England. Delphine, Cape Town, Rome. Awesome, guys. Obviously, Cape Town, we have North England in the UK. Mike, very welcome. Let me see who else. That's always awesome to see. What Pretoria, South Africa, Windhoek, Namibia. I think that is what we do have, benefit from COVID, the fact that we actually really expand and speak to so many people across the world. England, Caroline, very, very welcome. Awesome to have you on the call. All right, guys, what I've done, I've prepared some content to share with you. I'm going to go through the content. If there's any questions that you have throughout the time, don't wait, just pop them in the chat box, and then Alison will voice them as they come along. And then we also will have questions towards the end as well. I'm going to share my screen. Yes, I know it is the dreaded slide in PowerPoint. All right, let me just check where I am. Okay, there we go. And we just, for those of you who live in South Africa, we've just had load shedding, and load shedding just hit, but I've moved over to my UPS, so I do have power. Alison, everyone can still hear and see me. Just give me a heads up. Okay, awesome, guys. We just get that going so that I can have my screen and see you. Okay, there we go. So let's talk about sensory intelligence and how we can help you from an HR coaching or wellness practitioner point of view. I'll run through the detail with you. There's a lot of stuff that I can share with you. I've decided on these 4 key components, just a bit of an overview. To give you some background, where does this come from? Sensory intelligence is very much rooted in the neurosciences, so I want to elaborate a little bit on the science behind that. I can keep you literally busy for so many hours with this, but I'm just going to do a bit of a snapshot for you. There's also a lot of research being done in this area and in this field, so I want to share some of the research very, very, very briefly. And then hopefully all of you has done the sensory quiz. I know there's some familiar faces on the call, and I know you've been exposed to the quiz, so that's a freebie on our website. It's just a nice way to get an introduction on what are your thresholds most likely. The quiz is a very quick introduction to it, but it is a nice way just to get you introduced into the content. And then I want to talk a little bit about stress risks, because based on your neurological thresholds for sensory input, we can determine what your stress risk would be. And that gives us a nice indication of how we can use sensory processing as a determiner for people with a predisposition for potential anxiety or depression or even stress just going forward. And I will share 3 very basic, simple strategies with you. The simplicity is quite huge. It is very simple, but again, quite rooted in neurosciences. And then we'll talk about our kick-ass principle, AAS, and I'll share a little bit about how you can use that for yourself, but also obviously for your clients. And then we'll have opportunity for you to ask questions and go on. All right. I know you guys know this, but I think it's sometimes really, really good to just set the scene here. We know that depression and anxiety has increased by 25% globally since COVID. Sorry, I just want to take my Zoom bar off. So which is quite of a nasty or a real statistics to be confronted with. And then we also know burnout is now a recognized diagnosis. And if you look at the cost of mental health globally is costing the world economy $2.5 trillion, but expected to rise to $6 trillion in 2030. Those are stats based on Lancet, and that's quite a scary statistics if we think what is the potential cost of poor health and well-being going forward, and particularly from a mental health point of view. I wish I could say that mental health has got rid of the stigma that it has since COVID. I think it is definitely a topic that's being more discussed at the moment, but unfortunately, I think there is still a level of stigma. But I think against these statistics, it's really important to consider the work that all of us most likely on this call is doing and how important it is to be part of the solution. So what is sensory intelligence? Let's run you through that. It is about the senses, and you do have 7 senses, not just 5. And I'll elaborate on those 7 senses pretty soon. And then intelligence is really about knowing or understanding or using. But sensory intelligence doesn't mean we score your sensory thresholds and then you need to improve them. No. Sensory intelligence is really about understanding your senses. How do they get processed in your particular brain on a very individual level, and then understanding the environmental triggers that you have as a result of this. And then how can you use this information and these insights to just be more healthy, more focused, more engaged, and more productive. So it's really about the understanding. It's not a score that you need to improve. Absolutely not. And then we obviously use training and development, and it's in sensory processing as a theory. So that is the theory that we are using. And we are using assessments, workshops, and coaching. And the focus is the interaction between the human brain and the environment. So environment is absolutely key in the work that we do. And that's also how it's very different to a lot of the other work out there. And then the value, there's 3 main values that I want to highlight for you. And the first one is what we're going to try to focus on in today's session is the health and wellness value and the impact on mental as well as physical well-being. That's obviously very, very important. But we can also use sensory intelligence from a productivity point of view, remote working, digital fatigue. How do we understand our environment? How does your brain process is that how do we use that from a productivity point of view? And it's a great tool for relationships, understanding the diversity of how the brain processes the senses. One person loved noise, would put the radio on. Another person, very sensitive to noise, would put the radio off. And how does that actually result in particular conflict or relationship dilemmas for people? So that's the key thing here. The focus is only on the health and well-being piece today, as I say, because there's so much that one can share about this topic. But the reality is it's quite basic body-brain science. And it's really, how does the nervous system absorb the senses? What does the brain do with it? And what does it result in? So it's a very fundamental part of being human, and a fundamental part of us not operating in a vacuum. All of us are being stimulated by our environments on a day-to-day basis. And that's the important thing to consider. So our approach, sensory intelligence, is really understanding how your 7 senses actually enters the brain at the bottom. Now, that little circle at the bottom of that image is the spinal cord, and a very important fundamental understanding of where does this form a part to understanding how the brain operates. The piece at the top is the executive brain, the human brain, and obviously it's got those different colors because we know that the brain has various executive cortical structures that has got different functions, but it relies on input through the 7 senses and through the spinal cord and the lower brain structures to feed the brain. So very, very important to look at it from that point of view. The executive brain doesn't have an entry level from the environment. It enters at the bottom, and at the bottom only. So that's really important to remember. And these colors here, our barcode, just literally all of us have a different sensory barcode, a different sensory wiring. And if we understand this, it will really add to knowing why we do certain things, why we like certain environments, why we like even certain people. So that's just a fundamental way to look at it. So we've got 7 senses, not just 5. So let's just run through those to start off with. Seeing and hearing, the eyes and the ears, are our information senses. They are the 2 senses that kind of work the hardest, take in the most information, and we use them predominantly on a day-to-day basis to learn, to act, to do, to think. And the reality is, it is the 2 senses that gets overloaded also most of the time. If we also think about the fact that we are doing a lot more digital and online work, which does mean the eyes and the ears consistently have to process what goes on in the human brain. So it's definitely our 2 overloaded senses. Then if we look at touch, smell, and taste, and I group touch, smell, and taste together as your social senses, there's various other combinations as well. I'm just using 3 key ones here. Touch is in your skin, and you've got skin from the top of your head right down to the soles of your feet. So your skin is basically where does your body ends and the world begins. It's a bit of a barrier between your brain and your environment. And the sense of touch is also your sense of comfort within groups. How big is your body space? What type of clothing do you wear? What type of hairstyle do you have? Even your glasses fitting on your skin, on your nose, is actually using your touch processing to understand what's going on your body. So it's very, very much one of your key body senses. And then smell and taste. Smell and taste are the 2 chemical senses. They work very much together. Smell is the preferential sense of the brain, the only sensory system that bypass the thalamus. And the thalamus is like grand central station in the brain. All the sensory pathways go through the thalamus except for smell. Smell has a direct hotline to the limbic system for emotion and memory. So smell often has quite a significant increased response. People get overloaded by smell very, very quickly, particularly if they are sensitive, because of that hotline that it does have in the brain. And obviously also works very much with taste, and taste is around food. So if you think about these 3 senses, they are also to a certain extent have been deprived. I'm also referring to the fact that our worlds have become smaller. Yes, we have returned probably to pre-COVID levels, but I don't think everywhere in the world will go exactly to the way that it was before. So there had to do I think we had to adapt a lot. Our worlds became smaller, our worlds has shrunk to a certain extent, which does mean the amount of touch connections that we have definitely been reduced for a lot of people, not for everyone, but very important to remember that, because the sense of touch is very much also the sense that we bond. The sense of touch is, for instance, a key bonding sense. If a baby gets born, the first sense that the baby bonds with the mother is through the sense of touch. So very, very critical, primitive, yet very primal sense to help the body and the brain to connect. And then the other two senses that those of you think, oh, where's the other two senses? We only have 5 senses, relates to movement. Okay. And movement is also a receptor. We've got 2 sets of receptors that facilitates the body to move. One is the vestibular system. The vestibular system is in your inner ear. There's basically 5 little organs in your inner ear that sits right next to the cochlea, the auditory organ, to process positioning in space, where your head is in space, and how your head move against gravity. So it's a little bit like your body's GPS. Those of you who get car sick or seasick, you will most probably have sensitivity for the vestibular system, which does mean whenever there's that movement or that disturbance, your brain goes to what we call a sympathetic nervous system response. You start to feel groggy, or you start to feel nauseous. But the vestibular system in our inner ear works very much in conjunction with proprioception. And proprioception is located in every single muscle and joint throughout your body. And proprioception gets activated whenever we move a muscle or we move a joint. And these 2 senses go hand in hand, and they work together for posture, for balance, but for movement. The capacity for us to move from point A to point B is actually utilizing these 2 senses together. And I'm sure you will agree that they are the other 2 senses that have been significantly become deprived. They are key regulation senses. And really, this is my first aha moment that I'm going to highlight out for you. If you forget everything about this call, then please remember this, because it's a very, very powerful way that we have to teach people. And I remember I was working with children with learning problems for so many years before I moved and worked with adults. And we had to work with the movement system so significantly with children. But the same thing applies for adults. The more we move the body, the more we help the brain to stay regulated. I'm sure all of you have experienced that. You feel tired, you're working on a big proposal or a document, and you get to a point where you feel, I can't focus, I can't concentrate anymore. What would you do? I need to go get a cup of coffee, or I need to go get a glass of water. It's not the coffee that you are after. Your brain primes you intuitively to say, get up, because that's the intuitive way for your brain to stay regulated. So very, very important that we identify or acknowledge the fact that we are movement deprived, and that we actually need to take a lot more regular breaks, because it helps to self-regulate the brain in order to get focus, and it helps us to attend, and also very important part of de-stressing. The exercise industry have waxed this. I mean, those of you who do regular exercise or run or bike or go to the gym, there's so much data and research to show that physical exercise is good for the body and good for health, because there's also a sensory pathway. We just look at that from a sensory pathway point of view. All right, those are the 7 senses. All right. Then if we take the brain a little bit further, I don't know, any one of you have read the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman? Phenomenal book. Those of you who are interested in neuroscience and haven't read it yet, it's definitely a recommended read. Daniel Kahneman received a Nobel Prize for this book, and a lot of the science in that book and the application that they use is looking at top brain and bottom brain, thinking fast and thinking slow. And this really relates to a lot of the work that we do in sensory intelligence. So I'll just want to highlight that for you. We basically can cut the brain in half, the top half of the brain or the bottom half of the brain. We not go left and right. That's another dilemma or another discussion for another day, not part of the work that we do. But it's really the top part of the brain is your executive brain, conscious, controlled, calculated. The bottom part of your brain is unconscious, intuitive, and uncontrolled. Okay, that is how the brain has been designed. It functions like this. With the top part of our brain, we reason, we think, we learn, and we perform. And then obviously with the lower part of the brain, we've got gut, habits, preferences, and comfort levels. I just want to move my bar over to this side. Okay. So these two parts of the brain, quite important to determine. And then the other thing, which is also clear from Daniel Kahneman's work, and that we see only about 20% of brain activity is being allocated for us in order to think. Well, there's a lot of brain activity that sits in this lower part of the brain, where we try to create a sense of comfort, our gut, our preference levels. And the environment here plays such a big role. Think about the last time when you've said something or done something to realize a split second later on, oops, I shouldn't have said that, I shouldn't have done that. That is literally where this function or this hierarchy in the brain comes to play, because the lower part of the brain, the primitive brain, has been designed to be reflexive, to be protecting you, while the executive part of the brain is where we think, we reason, the prefrontal cortex, we problem solve, where we actually create a lot of the work that we do. But very, very important to understand this hierarchy within the brain, because remember, information enters the brain at the bottom, and at the bottom only. It doesn't enter at the top of the brain. Any high-rise building, in order to get to the top floor, you need to step into the elevator or the lift at the bottom, press the button, and it will actually take you to the top floor. The hierarchy of the brain, very much simplified, but works very much in that similar way. There's obviously a lot of interactions between different body parts, but that's how sensory information gets sent up for activation. And then obviously there's a to and fro pathway, or a to and fro messaging system between top and bottom part of the brain. But very important for you to understand this. And then I would always say the three key human functions that we address and that we work with through sensory intelligence is attention, emotion, and behavior. So the senses and the way that the senses get processed in the brain has a fundamental impact on these three human functions, which is really, really important to remember. So I just want to reflect it this way for you. So the thinking top part of the brain is IQ, the old IQ. I'm so glad it doesn't have much emphasis anymore, but it's really our executive function. How do we utilize the brain? EQ in the middle of the brain. And then sensory intelligence is really looking at this lower part of the brain. And without going into detail, we look at the primitive brain, the brainstem, the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, which triggers stress and releases stress or activate. How do we reduce stress? And also the reticular activating system. The reticular activating system responds to sensory input for arousal. And arousal is the fundamental function of attention, concentration, behavior. You want to go to bed at night? Are you going to drink hot chocolate or cold orange juice? Okay, you're going to go for hot chocolate, because hot chocolate is warm, smooth, and sweet. It actually calms the nervous system through the interaction with arousal. In the morning, you're going to drink cold orange juice, because cold orange juice is going to increase arousal, and it helps you to wake up for the day. So based on sensory input, we can actually impact arousal in the brain. And if we can impact arousal in the brain, we can impact attention, emotion, behavior, stress, so many elements to that, without going into detail with too much of the science. So environment is key here. We really consider and look at the environment, and how does the environment through the senses influence the human brain, and what does it result for you as an individual? Just to give you a little bit of a reference here, because I found that if we use this with our clients, they really understand this much better. And again, I'm sure there's no heavy neuroscientist on the call, and if they are, then I'll run away later, because I know the brain is highly complex, and trying to simplify it is possibly very unfair. But this is a way just to create some sort of category to understand how do the work that we do in sensory intelligence differ to other psychometric type of stuff? The Myers-Briggs personality profile, the Strengths Finder, Insight, Enneagram, the Big Five. There's so many assessments that we use to determine personality. But what we are doing from a sensory style point of view, we look at sensory thresholds, and sensory thresholds will predispose a particular attention, emotion, and behavior. Does it link with personality? Absolutely. There's a beautiful synergy between sensory styles and personality types, obviously, and there's research being done on that, not enough according to my liking, but there are obviously a lot of correlation with this. The key thing that we want to do is, if you understand your sensory thresholds and you understand your triggers, you can adapt your environment. And if you can adapt your environment, you can reduce your distractions and you can reduce your stress levels, which are really, really important. All right, so that's just a little bit of I want to give you 2 examples here, and I think I've got about 6 examples, and I had to cut some of them because I can get quite carried away with this. The best example for me, and maybe I'm giving my age away here, that show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I'm sure all of you, I'm hoping that all of you have experienced this. It's a bit of an older show. I know it definitely doesn't run anymore. But what happens, we obviously know these contestants are brought into the studio and then they are asked these difficult questions. And then obviously if they get all the questions correctly, they can win £1 million or $1 million or $1 million, whatever, currency you are working with. But think about the environment that those contestants are in. I mean, it's noisy. They are sitting on a very uncomfortable chair, by the way. It's not a nice big sofa. For instance, if you're going to talk show, you sit on a nice big sofa and they give you a glass of wine or a coffee or whatever. Here you are actually sitting on an uncomfortable seat. It's often a high chair. There's no footrest. There's no side, there's no armrest. There's people surrounding you. There's bright lights. There's music. So the 80-20% principle in the brain is absolutely brilliantly used with the producers of the show, because the reality is they don't want to give you that $1 million or those £1 million. They want you to struggle to answer those questions. So what they are doing, they are creating a physical environment through sensory stimulation that is actually disrupting the brain and keeping the energy of the brain in space. Okay, so it's kind of ingenious. And then people always say, oh, I can't, if I'm at home, I know all the answers. People always say that. Okay, what has happened? If people are at home, what has changed? The environment has changed. Okay, so if we put your body in a distracted, disruptive, uncomfortable, overloaded sensory space, the chances of you utilizing your executive brain really, really well is going to be reduced. As much as we then provide you with a comfortable space where you are feeling relaxed and your body is feeling relaxed, you can actually release your executive brain to be more active, to think, and to produce. Interesting, I've worked with a lawyer to do training where they were doing mediation. And we spoke about the fact that if you need to mediate or have a difficult conversation with someone else, being on the upper foot doesn't mean you have to sit in a type of environment where you overshadow that person. No, the more comfortable you can get your, let's call them your opponent into, if you have to have a difficult conversation, the most likelihood it will be that your conversation will be easier, and you might actually get to a solution to your problem much faster. So putting people in a physical space that is uncomfortable for them is most likely going to deter from them releasing best level of energy so that they can do what they need to do. And then just another example, I just couldn't resist. The guys who like, big fancy cars, just as an example, Mercedes employed 7 engineers to design the sound of this car door closing, because this is very prominent in retail everywhere. But just as one example, car manufacturers will actually design cars around a sensory appeal because that will make people buy a particular product. And there's so many other examples to this. So I'm always saying, if retail is using this science to make us buy their products, think about if we as individuals can understand what is happening in our brains and the people that we work with brains to use this so that they can better themselves in so many other ways. So just a powerful way to demonstrate how the senses are used across various industries to move a particular result or a particular choice in human behavior. I just think that's always very, very powerful. And then just obviously sensory assessments is, what does this mean for me as a person? Are you more sensitive? Are you more seeking? So the sensory assessments that we use is a way to measure your sensory thresholds. Okay, so your brain is primed, genetic predisposition to either be more sensitive for information or to be more seeking. Those are the two extremes. If you are sensitive, say for instance for sounds and for noise, you have low neurological thresholds, your brain over intake or process a lot more auditory information. On the other extreme, if you've got high thresholds for auditory input, people might call your name or speak to you and you haven't even heard them because your brain has been filtering out those messages. There's no right or wrong. It's just individuality. And how does this individuality result in you understanding your behavior? So it's understanding individual differences. So that's why we've asked you to do the sensory quiz on our website. It's for free. It's quick and easy. No, guys, it hasn't been standardized, but it is just a way to play around with the information. We obviously do have a validated tool that we use on top of that, but that's just something to play around with. It is frighteningly accurate. Just from talking from experience and having been using the sensory quiz for so many years. Just as an example, the sensory matrix is our full wellness tool. We don't just measure a quick version of your senses, we measure all of your systems. And based on every system, we can tell whether you've got sensitivity or seeking for each of these systems and what does that then mean. And then the sensory matrix provide a lot of feedback and solutions and strategies on understanding this, and then how do you optimize your environment accordingly. Senses on Call, believe it or not, I've built this in 2008. I did my PhD in the call center industry, the contact center industry, heaven knows why. It is such a nasty place to work with. And if there's anyone from call centers here, I stand by what I say. It's a really difficult environment for people to work in. It's extremely busy. It's very noisy. You can have up to 5,000 people sharing one particular space, and it sounds like a beehive. So it's a very, very busy and overloaded environment. And my PhD was, we can measure people's thresholds for that environment. Can we predict absenteeism? Can we predict attrition, tenure, and obviously can we predict performance? And my research, for those of you who are interested, you can get the link through our website. Obviously, I did prove my hypothesis with that. People who are more sensitive to their environments, they struggled in those type of environments, not because they didn't have the skill, no, because they weren't really suited to the busyness in those type of environments. And they were more absent, and they definitely had shorter tenure for those environments. And then we soon to be launching Senses at Work, which will just be a tool to look at hybrid working. Should you work from home? Should you rather go back to the office? How do we need to juggle understanding your own needs and your own thresholds before we make a decision how we do that? You know, for us as a team, we're a small team, and I'm, you know, not ashamed to say that when I put this tool together, it was quite a hard one for me to do because I am not the profile to work from home, and we do work from home. We do everything in our home offices now. So needless to say, I run a lot more. I used to be a runner, a slow runner. So I am filling my time with other activities to do that. But also important to see what is the best environment for you from a work point of view too. For that reason, we can look at what restaurant should you be going to. I can't tell you how many people over the years I've helped getting really angry with themselves. They need to go to the gym. They need to go to the gym. And when I read the matrix results, like, no, you shouldn't be going to the gym. You are sensitive to smells, you are sensitive to movement, and then often there was auditory and visual as well. So the gym is a very much an overloaded space for you. So no, let's choose another activity for you, which will be much better and better suited to your genetic thresholds, because they don't change. You are who you are. But really understanding our environment, which is really, really important. I want to share the Senshi tree with you. Based on your little quiz that you've done, you don't get the Senshi tree results. If you start to dig a little bit deeper into our work, you will get introduced to the Senshi tree. It's just a lovely analogy where we teach people based on your threshold, are you a root, a trunk, or a leaf? And it just works. A lot of people use it because it also demystifies what does it mean for you to have a particular threshold. And it's then such a great way to work together. So, and there's obviously a continuum. I'm going to just discuss the three main groups for you. There are variations, but it's purely because of time. But what are the three main groups? We've got Senshi seekers, people who's got high thresholds. So if you've got high A scores on the Senshi quiz, you will fall into this category. Or we've got Senshi neutrals, people who's got medium thresholds, and they are often a little bit in between. Just remember, you could score essentially neutral on the quiz, but if we do the full assessment for you, you could potentially be essentially neutral, put together, but you might have high threshold for movement, which means your body needs more movement, and you might have low thresholds for auditory, which means you need to reduce the sounds and the noise in your environment. So just bearing in mind, you can have those variations. And then we have our Senshi avoiders, our high B scores, which are your low threshold group. Okay. And maybe can one just see, I hope all of you has done the Senshi quiz and know what goes on with that, because I'm going to go ahead and just explain very briefly a few components of what does these types mean. And I'm going to bring it back into stress risks, which is what I want to do with you. So hopefully you've all done that. So let's look at high thresholds. People who have high thresholds are Senshi seekers. Guys, you don't choose to do this. This is part of your wiring. It's fundamentally part of nature versus nurture. Those two do play a role, but it is really your genetic predisposition. So these Senshi seekers prefer engaging busy and lively environments. They can get distractible because they will get bored very quickly. And those might be people that has hopped onto this call and then look at it briefly and like, no, I'm going to hop off again. Most likely, that is what seekers will do. They get in, listen a little bit, and then they might hop onto something else, or they might listen to me on the one end and do something else on the other end as well. But seekers, high threshold people, do have a higher propensity for boredom. They love and enjoy change. They typically are high risk takers. They've got a yes predisposition because their brain is always subconsciously ready for the next stimulation or the next challenge. And they would often do and then think, because the brain is primed to seek out stimulation. Okay. They avoid or dislike detailed structure and rules. I'm not saying you can't do detailed structure and rules. You can, but you don't want to get bogged down into it. And those are typically possibly the people who will run that red light or get that speeding ticket or that parking ticket, because they might actually tend to break the rules a little bit. They have low stress levels. Okay, their brains are more resilient. Yes. Okay. People with high threshold has a lower stress risk because of a more resilient nervous system. But they typically are really, really bad at stress management because they don't read their own body signs well. So low risk for stress. They do have a more resilient nervous system, but they don't manage stress well because they don't identify their essentially triggers or their stress triggers early enough. They are typically people who work, and then boof, from hero to zero, and they need to take a day or two off to recuperate. So they don't manage it really, really well. They do have a high risk for substance abuse, aggression, and reckless behavior, smiley face. It has been backed up by a lot of research. For those of you who are interested, we've got a whole research section on our website. Please go look if you want to see. But high threshold people are definitely more prone for substance abuse, aggression, reckless behavior, and even some studies have shown a higher incidence of HIV. It makes sense if we understand the nervous system and the nervous system tendencies from a sensory point of view. Those are our seekers, our high threshold group. Those of you with a high A score will fall into this category, hopefully. And we are boxing here, and I'm just giving you a few of them. The higher your score, the more prominent these behaviors characteristic would be. If you think some of it, because you could also be high threshold, but not that high. So it also depends on your level of seeking. If we look at low threshold, essentially roots, and just if I go back to the tree, leaves of a tree are out, the sun, the bees, the birds, the butterfly come and visit them. So there's a lot of activity. If we look at roots are deep down in the ground, cool, calm, quiet. They are our essentially avoiders. They prefer contained, quiet, and calm environments. They do get distractible because they get overstimulated quickly. Okay, so distractibility could be an element for both, but here with roots, it is the fact that they get overstimulated. They don't like change because change means the brain must be ready to switch gears, and they are typically low risk takers. They can do change and risk, but often a lot more calculated and thought through. They are brilliant to have in a team because they are the people that will say no. And no is actually a benefit because it means they will think things through and they will actually remember detail from before and then tap back into that detail. I always say, I think, and this is just my own saying, I think roots or people with low threshold has got bigger memory banks in their brain. The brain takes in more information, they store more information, they retrieve more information just because of their sensitive nervous systems. They love detailed structure and rules because it gives them structure and guidance, which does mean there's a sense of control of what's going to go into the nervous system. They do have high stress levels. They've got a higher stress risk. They've got a more sensitive nervous system, which does mean overload and stress is a lot more prominent for this group. But generally, they manage their stress much better because they know when to say, time out, I can't do this anymore, I'm overloaded, I can't do this anymore. So from that point of view, they are kind of easier to work with from a stress management point of view because they read their own signs really, really well and usually timeously, which is really, really good. They do have a higher risk for mental health issues, depression and anxieties. Also very clearly noted in the research, there's so many correlation studies looking at low threshold and its correlation with anxiety, depression, pain, fibromyalgia. There's a lot of diagnostic groups that we have seen a correlation with sensitivity. Okay. And then thank heavens, we've got our medium threshold, our trunks of a tree. They are essentially neutrals. Their focus and attention is appropriate to the task at hand. Change is fairly measured and calculated. They are usually quite adaptable and flexible. This group typically are good mediators, and they often mediate between the leaves and the roots because they can actually shift from their space much easier, and it happens for them more intuitively. They would say yes when yes is needed and no when no is needed. They've got medium stress risk. All of us are exposed to stress, but their stress is not so dependent on the environment, okay? What we do find with this group, because of their natural flexibility, they are often not always very expressive about their own needs, okay? Because of their mediation and their flexible type of approach that they take, they often disregard their own needs. And then, yes, boring in not really, guys, I know, but, you know, it's just playing around and making some fun with what does it mean? I always say if the leaves have got substance abuse and the roots have got aggression, then I guess the trunks must be happy with boring. Not boring, you could be perceived as boring or sitting on the fence, okay? So those are the three groups. These are the two kind of extremes, and we all sit somewhere on this continuum, and just you've got clear leaves and clear roots, and you could be higher but not such a clear root or leaf, or if you sit in a neutral, you could have variations across your different systems, which obviously the quiz won't pick that up. Okay, Alison, any questions so far? People happy so far? Okay, then I'm just going to bump. I've got 2 more, just go into some of the strategies for you. Guys, if we talk about strategies, everything that we do from a strategy point of view is bottom up as opposed to top down. Okay, I want to make this distinction very, very clearly. Top-down regulation is using cognition and cognitive frameworks. And obviously, I support cognitive frameworks. I am an occupational therapist. I have studied in the mental and the medical and the health sciences. But from a sensory intelligence point of view and the work that we work with bottom-up self-regulation. Bottom-up self-regulation is using the senses and using the body. The work that somatic and somatic coaching, for instance, are being done, or any kind of body work, really ties in beautifully with the work that we do in sensory intelligence, because we take technique or understanding from the same principle. So for us, it's all about bottom-up self-regulation. And I'm going to be frighteningly simple here. 3 strategies that you should implement right now. And if you are doing them already, then thumbs up for you, but that you should be implementing and definitely help your clients to implement. They're very simple, yet they're very much based on science. One is drinking water. And drinking water means you are using your mouth. Okay. And particularly if you drink water through a sport bottle, we call this, for instance, your best sensory snack. So firstly, anything that goes to the mouth, you're going to activate the proprioceptors in the mouth. You use your oral motor structures. Your oral motor structures are the most primitive form of self-regulation. Those of you who overeat or smoke or put something or bite on things, that is a way for you to tap into oral motor structures for self-regulation. How do babies self-calm or learn to self-regulate? First and foremost, they've got a sucking reflex. The sucking reflex taps into the oral motor structures to self-calm, to self-regulate. The same principles apply with us as we get older. We just need to apply it in a different format. But drinking water means you're going to activate your mouth. Water is the best fluid for the brain. And then thirdly, your bladder is going to get full. If your bladder is full, you need to move and walk to the bathroom to take a bathroom break. Brilliant. So drinking water will tap into the oral motor structures, and which is proprioception and touch in the mouth, and movement utilizes vestibular and proprioception. So immediately with those, you've got 4 sensory pathways being activated. And we know with the pathway in the brain and in the nervous system, they've got potential to regulate you. And then for a third, I'm just going to put there, manage your screen notifications. Let me just give you some of the images I think in pictures. So just drinking water, I've particularly gave you 2 images there of a spout water bottle, because by using a spout water bottle or a straw, you would actually be sucking. The sucking action actually increases the amount of proprioceptive processing to your brain. So it would actually enhance your self-regulation capacity. But whatever works for you, use whatever works for you. And then movement, whether it's a stretch break, standing up, stretching your arms, it's not going for a run or going for a walk. Yes, that definitely adds to it, but it's literally just getting up from your desk regularly. And then managing your screen notifications, going back to the fact that we are so visually and auditory overloaded. And all of us know that our screens and our mobile phones are such a distraction. So at least if you disable your notifications, or if you are visually sensitive, then use auditory notifications and don't use a slider coming in. If you are auditory sensitive, then use a visual notification. So literally choose notifications on your screens to fit your particular threshold. If you are sensitive for that input, don't use that as a notification, because every time when it happens, you won't even be aware of it. Sensory input is accumulative. Every time that it happens, it triggers the brain, it depletes energy, it triggers the brain, it depletes energy. It's such an easy way. We should manage our devices. Our devices shouldn't manage us. So it's a great way to keep the car, I think, to preserve the brain from an energy dispensation point of view. Okay, very, very important. And then kick-ass principle, let me just talk to you about how that quickly works. Very simple. AAS, avoid, anticipate, self-regulate. Avoid, if you know you are sensitive to sounds, you don't like to be around too many people, for heaven's sake, don't go to a shopping mall on a Saturday morning or when it's a busy time. Then do online shopping. So for me, it's like choose your battles. Avoid situations where you know it's going to overload you. But then the other thing is we can't always avoid everything. If we know that we need to go into an environment where it's going to be difficult, then anticipate, think, plan. You need to now go to that mall, then don't go on a busy time, go when it's quieter. Maybe at night, or if you need to go to your best friend's birthday and there were too many people and you don't like it, then go first and then leave first, So just preempt that. And self-regulate is when you are in overload. How do we use the senses in order to stay focused? And it could be closing your eyes. There are so many ways to do it. But using sensory strategies and body actions can keep us regulated. I'm not going to go through that. That's just adding to that. What I was wanting to do, we've got, where's Liz? We've got Liz Dobbins on our call, and I've invited her just to share the screen with us. So guys, think so long. If you have got any questions, Liz, I don't want to give you more than 2 minutes because I want to make sure that we have time for questions. Liz attended our course and she's also using the work that we do. She's a coach, but Liz, maybe just in 2 minutes time, a little bit of feedback from your side, if you don't mind.
Well, first of all, it's so wonderful to be here. And yes, I am currently a coach, ICF credentialed PCC level. And I truly believe the sensory metrics and the sensory intelligence has even opened my awareness in a deeper dive into how I move in my world. And I'm in that sensory neutral, and I have high thresholds in movement, where I now set my timer for every 15 or 20 minutes to get up and move, to stretch. I also have in the roots as an auditory. So my awareness of that is to move my office and my closet. So awareness of the sensory matrix and how I use that to myself first has been very much of a ease and productivity and calmness, and let me live in as a better listener as I work with my clients. And I use a sensory intelligence, I use a sensory metrics with my clients, so I know where their come from is and how I can meet them where they are.
Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you so much, Liz. That's awesome. Always awesome to have you on the call. Awesome. Liz, you can just mute yourself if you don't mind. There's some background noise there. Alison, guys, these questions, I can see these 2 questions on the chat box. Alison, do you want to maybe just work through the questions for me if you don't mind? Just unmute yourself, no?
Well, Paolo was just asking about the previous slide that we quickly went through, but I'm just busy typing to him and saying it was just a bit of a more detail for the kick-ass principle.
I'll explain it briefly. I was just wanting.
You can't get away with it.
I can't get away with it. It's absolutely fine. Let me show you briefly, just because I was wanting to make sure that there might be some questions that we have time to attend. Letters happening, you've got stimuli, you choose your response, and you've got an action. That's literally how the cellular mechanisms and how stimulation from nerve to nerve works in the nervous system. So obviously you've got a stimuli, you choose a response and action. If you avoid, you block that from happening. So the action is not even going to be there. By anticipation planning, you're going to manage how much or how little of the stimuli your brain is going to have to contest with. So for instance, the example, if you need to go to a mall, you have to go because there's no other way around it, then you're not going to go at a busy time. You're going to go in a time where it's quieter, because then there will be less stimulation. So you're anticipating. And then self-regulation is choosing your response. Say, for instance, and as an example, now you're in that busy mall, you have to go, you had no other chance. You might actually put a hat on, because a hat might help you to feel more protective, or you'll have a big coat, or you might walk and, for instance, a stress ball or anything that you fidget or fiddle with could be something that you would hold on to, or, at that time, to help you from a regulation point of view. Or you might even have your water with you, or you might have someone with you that can help you hold your hand or calm you down. So it's how can you use your body in that stage. Then, for instance, I would potentially also, for instance, create more walking distance where you need to go, because every time when you walk, it helps the body to stay regulated. There's various small ways, what we call sensory snacks and self-regulation, that I don't necessarily go into more detail. But thanks for the question. Alison, another question? You can stay on mute, Alison, if you don't mind.
There's one that's just come in. Is the sensory intelligence course a recorded online course, or are there set days when it is on?
Okay, how does it work? It is a blended course, so there are live Zoom sessions that we actually go through the modules, but then all of those Zoom sessions do get recorded, and then so it's both synchronous and asynchronous learning. So the live sessions are there for discussions. We do a lot of breakout sessions. It's quite an intensive course. The breakout sessions are extremely valuable because we believe in practical application. So it is a blended one. So no, it's not just an online course. We offer that as a refresher. So if someone has done the course and they want to go through it again, the online is a refresher. Are there other questions, Alison?
No, that's it.
So I was just, if you wanted to have more information, you are welcome to do your Sensory Matrix online. That is our paid version, where you would actually complete 120 questions, and then it gives you your whole spectrum for all of your systems, as well as a lot of strategies and insights. I've also just finished a research article on looking at the data for this, so that will go into publication next year. So hold thumbs that we get it published. I've also read a book many moons ago, Sensory Intelligence. It is on Amazon if you wanted to read that, for those of you who are into reading. And then obviously our practitioners course starts in April 2023. It's got 12 modules in the way that I've explained it. It's got live sessions as well as the video sessions. There's a lot of interaction on the learning management system on the live Zoom calls. And then we work through 12 modules. It is ICF accredited. It's also accredited through the University of Stellenbosch. So you, regardless of what area you are in, you will get continuing professional development credits for those from that point of view. Are there any other questions, Alison? Nothing?
Maybe we should just quantify there that it's 12 modules over 6 weeks. So is the commitment?
Thank you, Alison. It's 12 modules over 6 weeks. So you will choose your slot. We run it on a Tuesday and on a Thursday. So it only you have to free up 2 hours of a Tuesday and a Thursday, and it runs over 6 weeks. So it's 2 modules per week. And then we double it up. We've got a cohort that runs from in the morning as well as in the afternoon to actually accommodate all the time zones across the world. But yeah, it runs over 6 weeks. There are 12 modules. We do have a 13th bonus session. It's a Q&A. If people want to, for anything or any answers or any questions that haven't been answered, we also offer that. So that is literally the 33 years of my learning and my work put together, guys. I really love it. It is definitely part of my passion. For any one of you who are interested, we would love to hear more about it. If you have more questions, please let us know. There are more information on the website, and I'll also ask Alison maybe to share that to you as we go through. Any final comments, questions? Oh, Brenda, it's a pleasure. Molebogo, oh, you ask about the questions. Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. So that is just for more information, and we've worked through the questions, and this is just such a powerful quote for me. If you don't take care of your body, where are you going to live? So I really want to encourage you to look at self-care and self-understanding and self-development as a primary focus for yourself. And then obviously, if that's the work that you do with your clients, I think having a toolbox of varied tools to use obviously have capacity to enrich you as a practitioner. With our course, guys, the first, you learn about your own profile first. So we first do your own sensory matrix, your own thresholds. So there's a huge focus on self-learning and self-understanding before we actually do another sensory matrix. And I must admit, tongue in cheek, I work with children for 15 years using this, and only when I moved to adults did I start to understand myself, my husband, my kids so much better. And it has made a huge impact on the way that I manage myself, my environment, and my relationship. So the self-learning and the self-awareness is going to be primary at the beginning of the course. So if you want to learn about yourself, that's very much prominent into that. It's 5 o'clock. We've kept you busy for an hour, guys. Thank you so much for giving me your eyes and your ears in this digitally overloaded space. It was lovely to share the screen with you, and take care, stay safe, and feel free to engage with us further. This session will be recorded, and we'll ask Alison to send it to you if you want to re-listen to it or share it. Very, very welcome to do so. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.